beneficiary IRA or you get a large portfolio from your parents, you may just go spend it if you have no freaking clue how to handle money. But most people, again, get this money from their parents and they invest it for the long run, for themselves, for the rest of their lives, and maybe for their descendants. So there never is, and there never is going to be, simply based on age, a giant pullout of the stock market. And if there was, and if it was from baby boomers, it would have happened already. So yeah, that's just something that someone brought up to my attention on the internets. This fear that baby boomers may someday retire. Probably more than half of them already are retired, and way more than majority have already started preparing for a conservative portfolio. So it's just not going to be a factor. There's other things that may have value to worry about, but this is not one of them. And so that's going to end our investing stuff. And now I'm going to take a few minutes and talk about the ARK. This last weekend, I went to the ARK, or at least I went to the ARK protest. Drove straight in the morning from, I don't know, we left about 3 or 4 in the morning and got over to Kentucky in the middle of, what would we call this, Bumblefuck, Kentucky, something like that. And we got near the ARK, and it was funny, I didn't know exactly where to go, and as we were pulling off the interstate, it became really clear where to go. There was this mass of people, 60, 70, 80 people, and I had my wife and kids with me, and they weren't particularly interested in standing in the sun for several hours, so we pulled over, and I quickly got out, and they drove off, and I went over and joined this crowd, and I was a few minutes late for the beginning, but I was stunned at the number of people that were there, and as I walked into the crowd, I realized that there was also an incredible number of cameras there. It looks like every single local network TV station was there, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, that kind of thing. They were all there. There was apparently half a dozen crews, film crews from people making different documentaries that had all showed up. There were radio stations. There were internet-based podcasts. There was bloggers. There was podcasters. It was crazy. And in the midst of it all, I see all these signs protesting the protest. And it turns out that ARK Hovind from Florida, he's the son of Kent Jailbird Hovind, who spent many, many years in jail for tax evasion. He was there with his little posse, and apparently the police didn't recognize this place as a registered location for a protest, so it wasn't reserved per se. It's just a bit of public space that one could protest on. And since it was a bit of public space, I guess anyone could be there. There were about, 8 to 10 police cars, maybe with 1 or 2 officers each. Plenty of officers around the area directing traffic, what traffic there was, which was not much, and walking in and amongst the crowd and just making sure everyone stayed safe. So I guess that didn't hurt any, but it did seem kind of weird. The group that set this up is Tri-State Freethinkers. So if you are anywhere around the Cincinnati area, southern Ohio, even central Ohio, northern Kentucky, southern or eastern Indiana, this is a group for you. They do almost an event a day, and this group is only a couple years old and is one of the single largest freethinkers, secular, atheistic groups in the United States. So kudos to them for their incredible growth and all the efforts that they do. But, we agreed to show up at the spot, and it was public information, so ARK Hovind decided to show up. But we were told, well, the Tri-State Freethinkers were told, because I just showed up myself, that they could not put signs in the ground. They couldn't even stake down the tents, so they had to actually go buy weights to hold down the little awnings, the 10 by 10 awnings, so you can have a table under it and have a little shade. But ARK Hovind had all kinds of signs that he stuck in the ground surrounding the entire protest. So his counter-protest actually had more signs than our protest. And at some point, the police were talked to, and it was asked, can these guys do this? Can they stake the things in the ground? And the police officer in charge said that he had no problem with it. So it was one of those things that they were, I guess, based on what I knew, they were allowed to not follow the rules. And we chose to follow the rules. We were told we had to follow the rules, at least in advance. And the group decided they weren't going to make a big fit about it. Also, Bill Nye's movie team was there to film the events. And apparently Bill Nye himself was scheduled to show up, but the following day he was supposed to be at the ARK encounter filming with Ken Ham. Allegedly, he was told that if he showed up at the counter protest or at the protest, that Bill Nye or Ken Ham would not meet with him. So I guess he made a choice to get more information for the documentary versus a one-day event. So I'll be looking forward to the documentaries that come out in the future, and hopefully they will show people, more about what's inside the ARK. The other thing that was kind of interesting, and Eric Hoven may have done us a big favor, is that the story became more newsworthy because the film crews were able to get debate. They were able to get argument. They were able to get Aaron Ra and dozens of other people arguing with Eric Hovind and his flunkies. And that creates media buzz. That creates something interesting to put on TV. So in a kind of a way, some of these sound bites were put on local TV stations, and maybe some of the people that were watching TV just innocently came across the news, got to hear arguments about why the ARK was a bad thing, why the ARK was spending $18 million of taxpayer money, why the ARK in and of itself violates the theoretical position of the average Republican of small government, but yet here we have the government funding a private religious organization to the tune of up to $18 million. But we had great fun. We were there for about 4 hours, and I tried like hell to stay out of the sun because even though I have a bit of a tan because of all my yard work this year, I burn easily and still turned a little red, even spending half the time hiding in the sun. And it would, of course, been really clever of me to have sunscreen. The other thing that was a bit of curiosity was there was no bathroom, at least not at the protest site. They had actually contracted with a company to bring porta potties, one or two of them anyway, to be in the area so the protesters could take a break and go to the restroom. Well, apparently on the way to deliver, the porta potty company figured out this was to protest the ARK Park, and I don't know if they were afraid of offending Ken Ham or it offended their religious values. They decided not to deliver the porta potties, so we had no porta potties. Cleverly, the Tri-State Freethinkers quickly set up a driver that would drive people over to a nearby gas station, and we could use their bathroom and or porta potties that were there by the gas station, which ironically were from the same company. So people voluntarily decided to start taking pictures of themselves with the porta potties as kind of just a protest and putting it up on Facebook and Twitter. So that was kind of amusing. I did notice when I went into the gas station, and this is just, a small local country gas station that happens to be near an off-ramp of a big interstate. And one would expect normally to be one employee there, maybe two, stocking shelves or something. But there were 6, and they were all standing around looking at each other with nothing to do. It appears that they expected big crowds themselves from the ARK Park, which I will always call the ARK Park because it's nice rhyming, and apparently Ken Ham hates it, so that's good enough for me. But there was nobody in the gas station other than the 6 employees and protesters. Got to see the parking lot of the ARK, at least the far extreme side of it, completely empty. And I understand that the part of the parking lot that I saw and the pictures that went around showing it empty were pretty far from the entrance of the ARK. But this was opening day. This was supposed to be the day that had huge, massive crowds, special events going on, and there were no cars. We were by the off-ramp of the interstate, and one of the reasons the police were there was because of the protest and the counter-protest, but also because of the incredible crowds that were supposed to be there and the lines of traffic. There was no line of traffic. There was no line of cars to get into the ARK Park. There was no backup at the booth to pay for your parking. There was no mass exodus of a stream of cars off the interstate. Matter of fact, best I could tell during the time that I was there, as many cars turned left, which was away from the ARK Park, as turned right. And that doesn't necessarily tell me anything, but there was no traffic pattern change. It was kind of almost comical how little traffic there was. We were also amused by the fact that one of the signs that turned out to be one of the best things to do And if you have another protest like this along the side of a road, someone had a sign that said honk for reason. And we would get cars and trucks and actually highway trucks that worked for the state that were doing road work, road repair, would regularly honk as they went by us. So that was great fun, and it was a way for the people driving by to participate. So the whole thing went pretty smoothly. It got lots of media, and we'll be hearing more about that. And then when the whole thing was winding down, Eric Hovind apparently wanted to take a bunch of atheists over. And Eric Hovind is weird because he kept trying to be the nicest guy there. He brought in Chick-fil-A for everyone to eat. And so while he's being nice, he's also being a dick. So he brought in Chick-fil-A. He brought in cookies. He brought in all kinds of other food for the freethinkers to eat. Well, Tri-State Freethinkers, thankfully, had thought in advance, and we had pizza for lunch during the 10-2 protest. And pretty much everybody ignored his food, ignored his cookies, and at the end, we took it and donated it to a shelter for people that didn't have food, because it was more important for them to have the food than for us to eat Eric Hovind's food. But it's interesting. I don't think it's accidental that he chose Chick-fil-A. But, he's trying to be nice, but also being a dick about it at the same time. So he decided he was going to take a bunch of atheists over to the ARK itself, and he was going to get the tickets. I don't know if he paid for them. Apparently he has plenty of money to travel around from his little church work, but he did take 21 people over to see the ARK. And you may have seen some of the pictures around on the internet. The Friendly Atheist had a fantastic write-up, and of course, friend of the show, Hammett, wrote about it and got information from multiple people that were at the protest and the ARK. Dan Errol, also on his blog, wrote up a good, nice story about it, so you can go read more detail there, because I don't want to make this show too wildly long this time. But the thing was, people took pictures and videos of inside the ARK, and it's empty. There is nobody there. There is this massive area with all these railings, like you would expect. You're waiting in ride for a big roller coaster, and you snake back and forth, all empty. There was only a family maybe buying tickets when the atheists got there, and they walked around and took pictures of empty hallway after empty hallway, empty rooms, displays with no one around them. Most amazing thing I've ever seen. So, it's one of those curious things. I'm wondering how long that this place can stay open. So we're going to find out, apparently, if it can make money or not, but I don't see how it's going to happen. Ken Ham has, on multiple occasions, said that 2 million people were going to be there, at least during a year's time. And apparently he reported that 4,000 people came the first day. I don't know how in the fuck he came up with that number. And I don't know that I have a better number, but I know I don't trust Ken Ham with numbers. He thinks the Earth is 6,000 years old. So, but taking his number on face value, if the park was open every day and had as many people as the first day, every single day of the year, he still would only have 1.5 million, not the 2 million he's been promoting. So even with his fantasy number, it's not even going to be close to what he was promoting. So the other thing I wonder, for myself is, will fewer people go to the Creation Museum because they're going to the ARK Park? Only so many people are interested in this content. Do they go twice a year, and so now there's twice as many visitors, or do they go only once a year? And they have to pick one or the other. So now you're actually spreading out your guests to two places, which is not good for business. The other thing I learned is that Dan Barker was there representing the Freedom from Religion Foundation. And he did point out that the FFRF sent out letters to hundreds or maybe even 1,000 school districts, all within 50, 60 miles of the ARK Park, informing them why it would be a violation of the law to take a public school class to a private religious organization. And so hopefully fewer schools will dare to even go. I'm sure they still will, but a few less is nice. And if parents have grown tired of this place, maybe it can fail in a couple years. I do expect it to not be able to make money. It just depends on if Answers in Genesis, as a Christian church, as a religious organization, can fund it for, how long can they fund it for? So My hope, my dream, my fantasy is that it will just become empty and turn into a giant